What do all these games have in common? Apart from being successful games, they all, you might have noticed, look the same. And if you're saying to yourself, what? No, they don't look the same. Hold on, I'm gonna get to that right now. When I say look the same, I don't mean that the art style particularly is the same, that the animations are the same. But what I refer to is the general vibe and the general lighting and feel that a game exudes. And something else that you might have noticed is that all these games came out roughly around the same time period, or at least era of games. And those are the late 90s to early 2000s, aka the best era for anything that ever happened. Anyway, now that you realize that these games in fact do look the same, and you're saying, oh my god, I did not know this, I was so oblivious, thank you for it. Thank you, it's okay, don't worry. That's what I'm here for. With that said, let's talk about why these games look the same and why they used this certain aesthetic in their worlds. Hi, hello, my name is David. I'm a graduate game designer with 2+ years of experience of game design and development in the industry. And today I would like to talk about why these early 2000 games all look the same. And the first point I'd like to talk about is culture. You may have heard of it, you may have not. Chances are you probably have not. But that's alright. See, the early 2000s, well, also late 900s, not 900s, 90s, were a very, how should I say, without being on the nose, explosive era of generally the entirety of culture and media. Mainly in the US, but for the sake of argument and how aliens like to think about Earth, the US is the world in this case. So a very specific event that took place in the early 2000s, in the latter half of 2001, shook the world to its core. Never before have we seen anything like that. And the world found itself searching for a way to let go of this, or at least handle, to some extent, the anger and hatred that they felt. And this event would spawn many cultural hits and icons, ranging from the best piece of literature a human being has ever written. That, by the way, that series was spawned by Gerard Way and My Chemical Romance, which in hand was spawned by the aforementioned plane crash on 9/11. Which is that you can. I'm gonna put a 4chan screenshot right here that goes through it, so pause the video and read it if you want to. But that's crazy. This combined with the tech bubble burst of the 2000s, this would leave the public with a deep sense of insecurity for the entirety of the world. In hand, this would then be represented in media, such as video games. You notice in the screenshots that I showed before that all these games don't really have a lot of sunshine or general light, well, at least bright light. Then you'd have some light, but bright light in their environment. Or if they have sunshine, it's usually a sunset that's barely visible through a bunch of clouds, similar to how Majula looks. Oh, Majula is so beautiful. Still the best hub area of any Dark Souls. Not a hot take, but yeah. Anyway. The majority of games, when they would use lighting in their worlds, it would usually result in a cooler, bluish, but mostly greenish tint. Games such as Need for Speed Most Wanted, Shadow of the Colossus, or Infamous. And I have a theory to why this was a trend. In this time period, Matrix, one of the best-selling movies of all time, recently came out. And since then, due to his huge success in cinema, many other offshoots of media, such as TV shows, other movies, or games in this case, would use its very distinctive and unique lighting color for its level, which was their iconic green tint, which, for the record, it's sue me, it's cool as hell. Bring back the green tint, bring it back, it's so cool, bro. Enough about those. He made video games cool again. There was another reason as to why this happened. Generally, throughout the entirety of humanity, there were always movements and counter movements, which also applies in this sense, albeit these were not movements, but rather just a reply of culture to itself. Up until the end of the 90s and early 2000s, they were all stylistically, in shows and movies, they were all pretty bland and desaturated and just very forgettable, I'd like to say. And boom, 5 years later, you have disgruntled emos yelling at their parents. They don't want to take their school box to lunch, they wanted to just eat raw cigarettes and gulp it down with Mountain Dew. And since superheroes, Superman and the bunch, were extremely popular in the 90s, this would as well show itself in the early 2000s, where anti-heroes would take the place, such as Spawn, who was hugely popular at the time. That again would be represented in video games, where cool, sick, edgy dudes like Dante and his brother that is approaching constantly, and Alex Mercer, I'd say he was at the tippity top of edginess, like he was the edge of the edginess. And in what worlds do these heroes live? They lived in gloomy cities, underworlds, hell at times, and the quintessential edgy location, a Catholic church. There were so many churches at this period, especially in Devil May Cry. I don't know what was up with that, but they loved churches. And generally this lighting would subconsciously influence the player, where the player would get a feeling of, yeah, the world is in shambles. It's dookie. It's not a good place to live in. And one thing you might have noticed, if you were a gamer back then, was that the gamers that played kiddie Nintendo games in the 90s, they grew up, they were teens at this point, and what does an edgy teen want to play in a depressed world? They don't want to play Super Mario, they want to play Super Mario with a tribal tattoo? No. And that leads me to the second point of this video, which is demographic. As I already mentioned, the kids that played Super Mario 64, they are not interested in that anymore. Well, at that point at least. And developers kinda got sick by themselves of being already stigmatized as games are only for kids, and when their kid plays a video game, it's like, no, it's Satan himself made it, no. At this point, Sony, with its PlayStation 1, did not really have a major impact on Nintendo's sales. But there's something that happened at the beginning of the 2000s that would change the gaming landscape for forever, basically. And that's the release of the best console. I did not have it. How did I know it's the best? I don't know, everyone says it's the best. PlayStation 2. And also the first Xbox, and later Xbox 360. And what these consoles enabled is for players to play grimy, dirty, non-sanitary games that were, unlike Nintendo, was squeaky clean, and they have, oh no, I have to wash my hands before I make the game, God forbid there's some bacteria. These games were like, yes, grime and dirt and blood and puke, yes, we love it. And the kids ate it up, me as well. I'm guilty as you as well. Do not play innocent. You love that grime. You did. Games such as Halo, Gears of War, as I already said, the Shadow of the Colossus, but that's a different type of edgy. Simply the developers wanted to appeal to a wider audience. More mature players, older people, teens now. And apart from wanting to battle the stigma, it was also probably, as everything is, monetarily influenced and motivated. Although the stigma of video games only being for teeny tiny toddlers, that stigma would stay for quite a long while after that. What comes with games wanting to act more serious and for a more mature audience is that first, the plot has to be more serious. It has to take itself more serious. It has to be more serious. And it also has to look and feel more mature. What this means is that the colors will be muted, the lighting, as I mentioned, will be dimmer and colder. Generally the 3D models, they'd be more realistic, or if not realistic, just straight up dark fantasy. And the soundtrack, oh, it'd be so cool. Oh god, the sheer amount of sick-ass OSTs from games from that period, it's astounding. God knows I still listen to Soviet Connection to this day, it's so good. And the entirety of Shadow of Colossus, that would be another, soundtracks, another different video. I don't want to get derailed, as if I wasn't already. And when you combine all these overarching similarities, you notice that all these games have the same feel. But apart from games feeling and looking dark and emotional and edgy due to a worldwide trend, there was one more reason why games look this way and felt this way, and it isn't as obvious, and that reason is more technical than the aforementioned ones. You see, in the early 2000s, the game engines at that time, although being able to render 3D worlds, they were not particularly good at it, meaning the level of detail and textures and models was not up to par. So, to combat that, developers, probably this is only my theory, decided to, what if we just make the entire level, let's say, just very dark? That way we would follow a worldwide trend. People love that trend, they would buy those games. And finally, we could hide possible instances of textures not being detailed enough or a mesh being not modeled properly. We could hide all that with just less lighting. And at the same time, we could make the games look moody, we could make the games look cool. No one would say anything. They'd all see the game and be like, yo, they look sick as hell, even though maybe the floor in the house is using a Counter-Strike 1.6 texture. No one gives a damn because they don't see it. So at the end you have satisfied customers, aka players, and you have satisfied developers, and it's just a win-win situation at that point. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what the gamer, the person playing the game, what they see, it's about how it makes them feel. I mean, you can look at a immensely detailed game with high fidelity graphics, such as Black Myth Wukong. The environment is beautiful, but at some point I just feel like it's a UE5 showcase for Nanite and not much else to it. And on the other hand, there's Most Wanted, the original, not the Dookie reboot. A game that would, despite looking dated at this point, it would still be able to make me feel something, unlike Wukong that just looks pretty and that's it. So in essence, the games in the early 2000s looked that specific way due to a combination of reasons, mainly demographic, where just the player base got older, wanted to play more mature games, and such developers made more mature games with more darker lighting and with darker plot lines and more serious vibes to them. Also, designers use this because their engines could not really handle a lot of polygons and lighting. So they use this as an excuse to make worlds darker and edgier. And finally, it's all because of... If you boil everything down, it's because of him, kinda. If he did not do what he did, we would never have Shadow the Hedgehog holding a blicky. Which I don't know how it makes me feel. Anyway, thank you again for watching my video analysis. And if you want to see more videos like these, you can click right here or like right here. And yeah, until next time, peace out.